But the goal is you have to be able to catch that XML that's coming and then transform it into something else. And the something else has to be something that is compatible with your case management system, right? So just for yucks, here's a look at how that's done with PHP. And you know, it looks like there's a lot of complicated code here, but it's actually relatively straightforward. What PHP needs to do to perform an XSL transform is it has to instantiate a new processor, it creates a new DOM object, all this is boring. It has to know where the XSLT file is. That's the thing that knows about the variable names in your interview and knows about the variable names in your case management system. This is where the XSL, it creates a new style sheet, creates a new DOM object. This variable, $XML, is the data that's coming from the user when they hit submit. It's in a variable named XML, and it's being put into an XML object, you know, that's been pre-processed by this this program code, simple XML load string. You don't need to know how that works, just that it takes the XML, turns it into an XML object, so that something can happen. And then this is where all this is just to get to this one line, in which the results is a variable that holds the transform of the XML object that came from the XML, that came from the user, into this results variable. Now you've got the thing that has been converted into something that the case management system supposedly can understand. In other words, you might have turned it into a different format of XML. You might have also turned it into, let's see if I've got a slide for that. I think we do. You know, you might have turned that into a CSV, a comma delimited file. You might have turned it into plain HTML. You might have turned it into a text file. It doesn't matter. Well, it matters only to the extent that your case management system can read it. Now, it makes sense at this point to save that, because right now it's just a variable in the memory of your web server, to save that file out to a unique file name. I give an example, and this is not intended to be definitive, but an example of you use today's date and today's time and some random number, just in case your web server is, you know, very busy processing hundreds or thousands of intakes, you know, and there's one per second. You want to make sure that each one is written to its own file and they're not overwritten. You could also write some code at this point that basically takes the data and emails it to somebody within your organization. Maybe it's just a text message that basically says, hey, another online intake has arrived. And that could be done in any of a number of programs besides PHP. I think there's one more slide here. Yes. So the final step is the case management system doing some sort of import, and that's not something that I know anything about. That's unique to your case management system and the process by which it grabs that XML file. In other words, it needs to know where that transformed file is. It does something to import it into your system so that then you can either, now you're managing it within your case management system, or perhaps it brings it into a holding pen in which a conflicts check gets done, and then if it passes the conflicts check, then it gets converted into the case management system. And I think that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take the screen back from you.
Uh-huh.
So let me go ahead and show my screen and click through here. And again, John's information and all of the wonderful explanation he just provided is in this recording. We are being recorded, so if you want to hear his razzle-dazzle again, you can play the recording, which will be posted on LSNTAP. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that we made that cool infographic, and that's posted. That will be posted as well in PDF and a JPEG form.
Great. That's the magic right there. Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to hand over to Deborah to talk about what's going on in Pika once the interview has been submitted. Deborah? Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to share with you about how this all works at the legal aid line. We elected to take advantage of the fact that an email notification that an online application had been submitted was available. So the initial notification to Legal Aid Line that a web app has been submitted either in English or in Spanish is an email notification. And this is automatically generated in our system to a designated distribution list of staff members who are responsible for monitoring web intake. The way we distinguish between English-speaking users and Spanish-speaking users is that in the subject line, and I hope you can see this distinction, Spanish has been added, and that indicates for us that the application has been submitted by a Spanish user. If it doesn't have the Spanish in front of the A2J online intake, then the Spanish online application has not been used. So that's the trigger for us. And Cynthia, if you want to go to the next slide. Once you open that email notification, you get a very brief summary of the applicant and just some contact information. It also provides one of the two ways to access the application. The basic contact information also contains a link to the case in our case management system. And you can also see that all of this information is in English. You could go to the next slide. The application also lands in our A2J web application office in our case management system. And this houses the application in a list format. You can select the application by the name of the individual, as well as selecting the application by the link that's provided in the email. You could go to the next slide. Okay, either way you access the application, either through the email process or the office list process, this slide shows our holding pen. This is where we are going to review basic information to determine whether or not there is a conflict of interest. The only information viewable to us at this point is the information that you see on the screen, and that's just the basic identifying information and contact information. If you were to scroll down on the screen, which we have not shown you on the slide because the screen contains actual database contacts, if you were to scroll down on the screen, it would show you all of the database contacts for this particular applicant and for any other parties that have been identified in this matter. So it would show for the child and it would show for the opposing party as well. And we review all of those contacts to make a determination as to whether or not this would be a conflict or not. Just very briefly, if there is a conflict, the application is pushed into our case management system with only the information that you see here. And that is just so we can have a record of the contact and that we can notify the applicant that they are a conflict. Any other information that was entered into the application by the end user is scrubbed from the application. and it's not viewable or saved anywhere in our case management system. But if the application is not a conflict, then we accept the case and all of the data that was entered through the online interview process is pushed into our case management system and populates all the corresponding data fields in our case management system. So this slide, this right here, shows our initial application creation screen. All of the information in those gray boxes to the left of the large white fields would have been entered by the user. So what our intake specialists are doing is simply verifying information that was already input into the system rather than collecting it. And I just added a few additional slides so that you would have an opportunity to see that all of this information which would populate our client information screen, all of this would have been added in response to interview questions in the online interview process. And then the next slide just shows asset information. And the following slide just shows any liabilities information. So it's a huge time savings too for folks that are, for the intake specialists who are calling these folks back. It's less time on the phone for the client, and it's less time on the phone for the intake specialist. And that's how it works.